being with us. I'm Jackie Whalen, and I will be attending Colorado School of Mines.
I'm Adam Adame, and I will be attending Willamette University.
Hello, my name is Benjamin Peters, and I hope to be attending Soka University of America.
And I'm Constantina Mason, and I will be attending the University of Washington. Our unit coach is Mr. Brian Carlin, and our teacher is Mr. Richard Clark.
Come on in. They haven't started yet, so just introductory stuff. All right, and where are the coach and the teacher? Very good. All right, thank you for your time for this. All right, so we are Unit 1, and I know you're anxious to hear what the question is. It is going to be question 1. What are classical republicanism and natural rights philosophy, and how do they influence the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights? Which, if either of these two sometimes competing philosophies has prevailed in the United States, since the founding period? Explain your position and give evidence to support it. What contemporary conditions of American society and governance, if any, can be attributed to the tension between classical republicanism and natural rights philosophy? Explain your position and give evidence to support it. Timer, are you ready?
Yes.
If the panel's ready, we are looking forward to a conversation on this topic. You may begin.
As Thomas Paine states in Rights of Man, the mutual dependence and reciprocal interest which man has upon man creates a great chain of connection which holds it together. This mutual dependence that Paine refers to is comparable to the relationship between natural rights philosophy, characterized by the protection of individual rights, and classical republicanism, interested more in the common good of the society. While very different ideologies, both philosophies are enshrined within the founding documents of the United States. Neither is effective on its own, and when intertwined, make a stronger republic.
In the writing of the Declaration of Independence, one can clearly note the connection between John Locke's theory of natural rights, as mirrored in Thomas Jefferson's life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, and Aristotle's classical republican idea of uniting a group of individuals into a people. While both philosophies are integrated into the Declaration, natural rights undoubtedly prevails.
The Magna Carta and the English Bill of Rights, two of the key documents comprising British common law, had a significant influence on the founders' thoughts about natural rights philosophy and classical republicanism. The concept of limited government and representative taxation found in the Magna Carta are clearly influenced by classical republicanism and are represented in the United States Constitution in Article 4 and Article 1, Section 8. Freedom of speech, press, and trial by jury are just a few of the individual rights borrowed from British common law that are mirrored in the First and Sixth Amendments.
The prevalence of natural rights philosophy is evident in Supreme Court rulings, which in subsequent years have shown a favoring towards individual rights. Supreme Court cases are often reflective of the major social issues conflicting the nation, and decisions are most often representative of the constantly changing will of the people. Additionally, as Madison summarized in Federalist 51, the federal government is less likely to favor a harmful common good because a society is broken into so many parts, interests, and classes of citizens that the rights of individuals are easier to protect.
Supreme Court decisions Kyle v. U.S. and Olmstead v. U.S. have significantly extended the individual's right to privacy. However, in 2001, President George W. Bush signed the Patriot Act into effect, greatly reducing protection of privacy in a proclaimed act to prevent terrorism. Following the 2015 San Bernardino shooting, the Federal Bureau of Investigation requested Apple to create a general backdoor into iPhones. Apple, seeking to protect individuals from governmental access to their private information as expected under the Fourth Amendment, refused to create the software, thus overlooking the FBI's claim to protect the common good.
In the digital era, the issue of privacy is debated frequently. More recently, Cambridge Analytica's invasion of Facebook users' privacy resulted in an appearance to Congress of its creator, Mark Zuckerberg. Similarly, recent cases of hacked user data at government institutions and private institutions, such as banks and credit reporting agencies like Equifax, further challenge proclaimed assurance of privacy. While credit reporting agencies are part of the private sector, users have the expectation that their personal information will be protected from the government, thus upholding the Fifth Amendment.
Undocumented immigration has initiated a very controversial debate between natural rights and classical Republicans. A natural rights advocate, such as Illinois Representative Mike Quigley, would stress the importance of protecting the individual rights of undocumented immigrants through sanctuary cities or the implementation of an easier path to citizenship. Alternatively, Texas Representative Lamar Smith promulgates a classical Republican perspective by arguing that undocumented immigrants are a threat to national security and are taking advantage of the free educational resources available in the United States.
Protesting low pay and low funding for public schools, teachers in Arizona, Oklahoma, and West Virginia walked out of their classrooms earlier this month. Strict restrictions on educational funds have caused serious setbacks in public schools, leaving them closed and cold. Not only are students suffering, but teachers in North Carolina and Oklahoma are significantly underpaid compared to other state salaries, leaving them economically challenged. Fighting for their own liberties and the common good of education, teachers are hoping to make a bold statement that the representatives will not be able to ignore. Thank you.
So I'd like to revisit a concept that you talked about in your paper as the Supreme Court being the protector of natural rights. Is that an appropriate role for the Supreme Court to take for itself?
The Supreme Court under the founding generation was initially meant to check the constitutionality of the bills passed by Congress and the executive orders passed by the president, However, in Marbury v. Madison in 1803, the court has since implemented the judicial review process, which then allows them to not necessarily create constitutional rights, but then understand not create, but use the rights already in the Constitution to then further them.
And adding on to my colleague, the role of the Supreme Court, according to Article 3 of the Constitution, is to, and through the system of judicial review that's been created, is to interpret the constitutionality of legislation. And the Constitution is a document that is intended to be a limited, it's intended to promote a limited government, so as John Locke argues for in the Secretaries of Government.
Also, after the Civil War amendments, and particularly the 14th Amendment with due process clause, the individual rights that were expanded under life, liberty, and property, such as privacy in Griswold v. Connecticut, and also in Roe v. Wade, showed that not only the common good was necessary in this era, as it did when slaves were issued the right to vote with the 15th Amendment, but also individual rights towards life, liberty, and property.
You started by mentioning mutual dependence and reciprocity that are necessary in a civil society. And you also mentioned Magna Carta and the Bill of Rights as a restraint on the government and how we're moving towards this emphasis on individual rights. But I'm curious what you would say about the role of virtue in civic society and what virtue should be taught to restrain the individual.
Montesquieu stated that civic virtue is a love for one's country and its laws, and he said that the best way to promulgate this is through education and even through familial interactions with students and younger individuals.
And as James Madison said in Federalist 55, had every Athenian citizen been a Socrates, the Athenian assembly would still be a mob, showing that if natural rights are left to run to their furthest course, then there is still inherent issues with that, as it leads to a mob mentality, as Aristotle wrote about, and there needs to be classical Republican elements, as we have in our Constitution, to support that.
Classical Republicans such as Aristotle, Plato, and Cicero all advocated for civic education, which teaches civic virtue starting at a very young age so that our citizens have the knowledge to protect their own rights as well as what is best for society.
We can also see.
Go ahead, finish.
We can also see in Alexis de Tocqueville's Democracy in America, he introduces this idea of enlightened self-interest, where me going out and promoting my own interests helps the community at large in some either micro or macro way.
What role did did Jefferson and Locke, for example, the founders, more generally see for religion in the concept of natural rights? How do religion and natural rights intersect?
Locke believed that we have innate morality that we have to find through reason, and so if we use reason to find those, then through natural law we can determine natural rights. And the three most important natural rights that he outlines are life, liberty, and property in his second treatise, and this is seen mirrored in Jefferson's life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Additionally, many settlers who were coming to the colonies before the founding generation, they were often escaping religious persecution in Europe, and so the founders were very concerned with that religious freedom that they were searching for when they first came to the colonies, and so it was very important to them to have freedom of religion within the First Amendment.
And John Locke believed that these natural rights that we have granted ourselves, they would be impossible without the existence of God. Therefore, we must embrace religion, however, in whatever way you choose to practice it.
Thomas Jefferson had a slightly different view. He believed that God put these ideas of morality directly into our minds, and so we were born with them. However, Locke believed that you had to discover them.
I'd like to get back to the civic virtue topic. What would classical Republicans think of career politicians?
classical Republicans would most likely be in favor of career politicians because classical Republicans, such as Aristotle, wanted representative government rather than a direct democracy because they had seen in the direct democracy of Athens that it will always lead to tyranny and mob rule and thus is ineffective.
We can also see with the story of Cincinnatus that most classical Republicans, I can't say it either, probably would have believed that this kind of civic virtue that Cincinnatus displayed would be what politicians should show by retiring, stepping down, but after helping your country further.
So the virtue is stepping away from power.
It's
This virtue is not necessarily stepping away from power. It's once you recognize that you are no longer a accurate representative of the people, and you're instead just trying to gain political power or appealing to like the mob mentality, as like Montesquieu would have wrote about like term limits and separating the differences or separating the like virtue of politicians from the political desires of some.
What obligations do? Oh, rats. I had my lawyer cross-examination hat on and I was ready to go, but oh well. Alex, you first.
I really liked your paper. It was very easy for me to follow, hearing it rather than reading it, and I love the variety of examples, including very recent examples. You were talking about state representatives and some uncommon examples there. I really appreciated that. You know, I thought this discussion, we didn't get to it in follow-up, but I wanted to, this discussion of privacy, right, and how important that is. And, you know, I think I would encourage you to think about, well, where do we find that right in the Constitution? And then in these series of Supreme Court opinions, as Scalia suggested, well, maybe privacy is contingent or depends on what modern technology is publicly available. What do we think about linking our privacy rights to the advancement of technology? So, you know, more to discuss after today.
I thought you did a great job. Your opening statement was phenomenal. Lots of really good examples, past and present. I really liked your discussion of illegal immigration and the classical Republican versus the natural rights. I thought that was fantastic. You did a good job in bringing up examples in the response. The Cincinnatus example was great. That was really good. The one thing I would say is you didn't quite answer my question. I was hoping you would give me some virtues that should be taught, maybe honesty, maybe self-sacrifice. You know, what kind of civic virtues do we need? But you did emphasize that they should be taught, and that all of the classical scholars said that. So I thought you guys did a really good job. Just nitpicking.
Yeah. So let me say a word about the statement. I thought it was really good. And I want to talk about the immigration question for just a minute, because I agree with Professor Kern on this point, that was a tremendous, that's one of the best examples I've heard. And the reason it was one of the best examples is not because, you know, sort of the underlying principles, but it was stated in a neutral way, recognizing that there are both sets of virtues here, and there is tension. And people have strong opinions about which aspect of those they wish to emphasize. You cite an example of an elected representative in each case that has articulated well the principles that are at issue here. I think this is, I mean, it was a model example, and it was a lesson in civil discourse about a very controversial and challenging issue for all of us. So I really thought it was really well done. The religion question, I thought she handled, it took us a little while to get there, but we did get there. The religion underlies the Jefferson/Lockean view of natural rights, and there's going to be a debate that was preceded him, and it will follow us about, you know, whether that remains the case today or should remain the case today. If that exceeds the amount of time we have, I'll just simply say it was a very strong presentation, and I enjoyed the opportunity to hear you. Thank you very much.